Hello guys from Plant Reviews. Today is 2nd of July and I'll talk now about one very beautiful plant that usually you don't need to plant because it's supposed to be a quasi weed, but is an absolutely gorgeous plant that if you're lucky you will end up having this plant just basically arriving in your garden from seeds spread around from somewhere else. The plant is called purple toad-flax, scientific name Linaria purpurea, and the scientific names Linaria means similar to flax. The scientific name of the flax is linum, and purpurea means purple due to the obvious color of the flowers in the wild variety. This plant belongs to the family Plantaceae, in the group of indeed the plantain plants, also called fleaworts, and it is native to southern Italy, where I also come from, and is usually grown as ornamental in many countries, including UK, in which has become naturalized. It has become naturalized in many other countries as well, including North America. Sometimes can be indeed a little bit invasive, however not at such an extent of endangering your other plants, in my opinion. I have this plant for about 3 years in different areas of my garden, and I have to say that they are very well behaved. You don't risk to get overridden by these plants. The plant is a perennial herb, but as you know, perennials means just a plant that is not annual. This plant is actually pretty short-lived, just a few years. It is a plant that grows up to about 1.2 meters, but occasionally taller. Indeed, my plant is about 1.5 meters. However, it is a plant that, even if it's quite tall, usually doesn't require any staking because the stems are actually very strong, quite rigid. Indeed, is of a huge help if you have plants whose stems tend to fall over, like for example me, some tall bearded irises or some lilies that I basically tied together to this plant to trying to keep them upwards, and I have to say it is working very well. The leaves are very nice. They are bluish green and are a great contrast against the rest of the foliage of the most of the garden plants that is basically usually green, and in my garden actually matches very well with other bluish green foliage plant like the Melianthus major here, or the beautiful pineapple broom that unfortunately is at the end of the blooming season. I have still a few flowers, but still its gorgeous foliage is as beautiful, silvery, blue silvery as usual. The plant produces inflorescences, lots of inflorescences actually, as you can see. It really blooms profusely between late spring and early summer, mostly June and July, with dozens of very small flowers that look like miniature snapdragons. The flowers are five-lobed. Actually, you can see it better here. I'm trying to focus the camera. Oh, perfect. You can see actually that the flowers have five-lobed, two on the top and three on the bottom, and indeed they looks precisely like miniature snapdragons. The color is very beautiful. Is a bright purple, even if white and pink varieties are also known, and the flowers are about, I would say, half a centimeter in diameter, so really small, but the racemes are very are produced in a lot of stems on the same plant, and indeed you can see that it is quite a show, this plant in the garden. Even if it's not fragrant, it's a plant that is absolutely loved by pollinators, in particular bees and bumblebees that surely are attracted by the color of the flowers and supposedly by the copious amount of nectars, I believe. The flowers are born in several dozens on each flowering stems. They bloom from the bottom to the top. Indeed, as you can see in this stem, most of the flowers are already in producing seeds, are already setting seeds. Proceeding on the top, you start seeing the spent flowers, then the flowers in bloom, and then the flowers in bud. As you can see, the number of flowers produced by each plant is enormous, and they set seeds very quickly, and they can set seeds quite easily in the garden. Most people really sometimes get this plant a bit out of control, but in my opinion it's a very easy plant to dig out of the garden if you don't want too many. Anyway, it's such a useful plant in my garden, in my opinion, both for aesthetical point of view, for the fact that it's so much loved by pollinators, that I would be just grateful if this plant starts multiplying rapidly in my garden. I'm sorry that is raining a little bit now, so I hope that you are able to still enjoy the beautiful colors of this plant. As I said, there is a white form as well, and the pink cultivar is called Canon Went. The plant is very slender, but as I said, is not fragile at all. Not fragile at all. The stems are pretty stiff and rigid. Is a plant that doesn't need absolutely any staking, and actually, as I said, I use it to tie other plants that might follow over instead. It is a plant very adaptable to dry conditions and can grow both in shade, partial shade and full sun. In the shade it tends to grow a little bit taller, obviously trying to reach most of the sunlight. However, it is quite a tall plant in my opinion. I've never seen specimens growing lower than 1 meter. As I said, the seeds mature usually in late summer, and they might start appearing everywhere. However, if you don't really want them around, they are pretty easy, as I said, to dig out. Another option obviously is heading the plants where before they start setting seeds, but as I said, really it depends by you. I would you can see actually a bumblebee coming for feasting on the flowers of this plant. Is such a spectacle and such a useful plant for pollinators, really, that I love to be surrounded by pollinator animals, and it's a pleasure really to see their behavior. This is definitely a must-have plant, I think, in a pollinator friendly garden, a bee friendly garden. As I said, you can head the flowers if you don't want the seeds. However, just be careful if you want to leave the seeds developing on the plant in order to enjoy the flowers as much as possible, because the first seeds will be mature before the last flowers are died out. You just have to be careful, if you don't want this plant growing too much around, to head the plant really as soon as you see the first seed pods drying out before they spread the seeds. It really depends by the conditions of your garden. I have so many plants that seedlings usually have quite a tough time to grow. Indeed, I don't. This year, for the first time, I realized that I don't even have many weeds around, because for them really reaching sunlight with all these tall plants around is almost impossible. So if you have a crowded garden, it helps a lot against the weeds. About the lifespan of the plant, as I said, is pretty short-lived, 3 years at the most usually. And if you grow this plant in the sun, another nice feature of this plant is that the leaves turn pink in autumn, so they add seasonal interest also not only to the summer garden with their beautiful purple flowers, but also with their pink leaves in autumn. About the use in the garden, some people like to have in huge numbers. I've seen borders of these plants and they look absolutely amazing. Some other people prefer to have it just as it grew with my plant, just as a specimen plant against other plants that offer different texture with different kind of colors of leaf shape, flower color and flower shape. I think in my garden having a single specimen works great, but nice thing, I never planted this plant, it just grew, and probably the one seedling that grew just because it's at the very front of the border, while this plant really should be at the back of the border. I was lucky enough that grew precisely in the area that I had a couple of irises growing around, so I could tie them up because one is actually developing a seeds and a seed pod, and the seed pod developing is camouflaged by the leaves of the purple toad-flax in order for the bird not to start picking on my seed pod. I have lots of problems with irises, seed pod and the birds coming to eat them. This plant, as I said, is very easy to cultivate. Sometimes you don't even have to plant it yourself. However, it is a plant that you can also find in garden centers and online pretty easily. About the positions in the border, obviously, if you end up with a garden with a plant like me that basically grew out from the soil itself, you don't really have any control where it grows. Otherwise, if you plant it yourself, definitely it's better at the mid or back part of the border, according obviously to the height of the plants you have. In my opinion, this is a great plant for company with other tall plants, as I said, with lilies and dahlias especially, because especially if you have a few plants of the purple toad-flax, you can actually tie them together, lilies, dahlias and toad-flax, because also dahlias sometimes they tend to fall over, especially when they're producing their big flowers. This way you can enjoy quite a long blooming between lilies and toad-flax in summer and dahlias between late summer and autumn, and the border, in my opinion, looks absolutely fantastic. Very adaptable to many kind of soils, as I said, ideally well drained, it's quite drought tolerant. I'm not too sure if this plant can stand waterlogged condition. I wouldn't say so, because in my garden is quite a dry garden, and I have to water it basically couple of times a week at least, because it's not raining that much. Today luckily it's raining finally, but definitely I don't think this plant likes a waterlogged condition. Every time I saw this plant growing also wild, especially near roads and meadows, it grows pretty much in areas in full sun, and I've never found it in the mud or near rivers. However, obviously you might find it there. Me personally, I never did, so I would recommend a well-drained soil. Partial shade or full sun that these plants will grow anyway, but obviously very probably the plant will bloom much better when in full sun, like in this area of my garden, where indeed is accompanied by lilies and dahlias that also need full sun. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you would like to subscribe to my channel, if you like the video, that would be great. So in this way you can support my channel and get updates when I post new videos. If you didn't like the videos, obviously give us a thumbs down and just let me know the reason why you didn't like it. So in this way I will try to do my best for improving my next videos. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you in my next videos. Bye.